Hey, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. And we're continuing our series on global business. And as you can see here in this title slide, today we're looking at modes of entry into the international marketplace. Our sixth lecture talking about, well, what are we talking about when we refer to the term modes of entry? What we're really talking about is a firm that has experienced some degree of success in their domestic marketplace and is now considering, well, should we go international? Is there a business opportunity for us to be successful not only in our own domestic marketplace, but in another marketplace in another country? What are some of the questions we should ask ourselves? What are some of the ways or modes that we might be able to enter into that new market opportunity? That's really the topic of this lecture, so let's jump in. You can see here this diagram from the textbook, a set of questions that will be asked. And of course, the questions as they're phrased here in this diagram are a bit simplistic, but I think you can understand that each one of these questions has a great deal of detail and nuance and research that is necessary to successfully answer any of these four questions. So the first question, is there international demand for our product? And that's one of the first things that the firm will be asking. Is there demand in that other marketplace? And typically, the question is not simply international demand, but really, is there demand focused in a particular country or region for this product? Again, most companies are not simply trying to answer the question, hey, is somebody in the world want this? No, they're really asking, hey, it's been brought to our attention, or we believe, or our salespeople tell us there is a possible opportunity in the United Kingdom, in Switzerland, in Sardinia, in Okinawa or Australia or New Zealand, a specific region. And so the question is there sufficient demand for our product in that particular marketplace for us to consider the rest of these questions? And of course, you see there, if the answer to that question is yes, or at least we believe that the answer is yes, the next question, can our product fit into that foreign market? Would it need to be modified? Would marketing need to be translated into another language? Do we have to adapt for different electrical systems or different types of consumers and different types of needs? So basically, the next set of questions revolves around if you believe there's demand in a marketplace, does our product need to be changed or modified or transformed? And can we do that in such a way that it would still leave us an opportunity to make a profit after modifying our product to fit this new potential foreign market? Again, there you see there, if the answer is yes, now we go to the next question. And of course, if the answer is no to either one of those questions, then really it becomes the only natural conclusion is, it doesn't look like that marketplace makes sense for us now. We probably ought to stay domestic. However, if the answer is yes, the next question, the third question, is the foreign business climate suited to imports? Do other factors in that business climate make it attractive for us to think about a mode of entry, a way for us to start bringing our product into that marketplace? If the answer there is also yes, then the next question, the fourth question there, does the firm have, or can it get, the necessary skills and knowledge and expertise to do business in a foreign marketplace? And of course, the question there, you can see how it's phrased. Do we presently have the skills, knowledge, and capabilities, or can we acquire them? If you don't have the marketplace, you don't have the right people, you don't have the experience, you don't have the vendors, you don't have the support, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but it does mean that you have to acquire certain skills and knowledge and expertise in order to go international. And then the question becomes, can all of these four things be accomplished in a cost-effective way that still leaves us an opportunity to earn economic profit? And if the answer is yes, then we go to the next slide, which is how should we consider bringing our product or service into this new foreign marketplace? And you can see here that we will at least describe them as 4 broad categories of entry into another marketplace. You see the 4 entries there. There is a mode known as exporting. There is a mode known as licensing, or sometimes also that embraces franchising. There are strategic alliances and joint ventures as a 3rd mode of entry, and then there is FDI, or foreign direct investment, as a 4th mode of entry into a new international marketplace. Now, these are 4 broad categories. When we talk about this from a very nuanced, specified kind of perspective, there are several different layers and flavors of each of these types of entry modes. However, for the sake of this class, we'll simply deal with them as 4 options. All right, so let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of each of these 4 options. When you think about exporting, well, what are you really talking about when you talk about exporting? What you're really talking about is taking your existing product, taking a bunch of them and sticking them in a big brown box, sealing up the box, calling FedEx or UPS or whoever it is you're going to use, shipping it to the other country and selling it there. And you can see the advantages. Because there isn't a lot of adaptation of your product necessary, you're taking the product you're already making, right? Then there isn't a whole lot of significant upfront cash outlay, and therefore your risk or exposure is relatively low. You simply got to pay for the transport to send the stuff out there. Now, that's a great way to get started with international activity, to just simply, in some senses, verify, hey, if we send a bunch of this stuff out here, will people buy it? The disadvantages you see in the far right-hand column, once your stuff lands at a dock, at a port in that other country, it may be subject to tariffs or taxes or fees that are imposed by the other government, the receiving government. In addition, over time, it ain't cheap to ship stuff by UPS or FedEx, and transportation costs add up, especially when the transportation is to another country, right? Now, in addition, that government of that country may have additional restrictions other than just simply fees and taxes and tariffs. There may need to go through customs. It may sit on the dock for a while. There may be quotas. There may be other restrictions that are placed on you besides simply having to pay a fee. All of that over time can really eat into the profits that might be reaped by exporting. And that's why some folks decide, well, you know, maybe we've tried this export thing. There seems to be an appetite for our product in the market, but this is just an expensive way to do it over time. Isn't there another way to do this rather than building it here, putting it in a brown box, and shipping it over around halfway around the world? And the answer, of course, is yes, there are other ways to do business overseas. The second tier you see there, licensing, sometimes known as franchising, depending on what you're doing. But the whole point here with licensing is you are teaching a company in that other country to make your stuff there. And therefore, you're avoiding a lot of the transport issues, tariffs and taxes issues. Hey, it's now a product that's made domestically there. And therefore, it's a lot more immediate to move it into the marketplace. It's much faster. It's made there with local materials. All you're doing is you are training up a local subsidiary or a local partner to build the stuff there, and you're taking a small fee with very little capital outlay. Now, that sounds really great to have another company there make your stuff. However, there can be problems, right? One of the problems is you may be training up your number one future competitor with your special sauce knowledge. And this happens a lot when we talk about the related idea of franchising. So for instance, consider if you want to try to start selling pizzas, because you're Pizza Hut, and you want to start selling pizzas in Thailand. You believe that consumers in Thailand might have an appetite for your style of pizza because, well, at this time, nobody makes a pizza in Thailand. So you train up a local company to make pizzas and sell them there. Why? Well, because quite frankly, you can't export them, right? If you make a pizza here in the United States at a Pizza Hut, by the time you ship it to Thailand, it's going to be cold. It's also going to be moldy. It's also going to be awful. Therefore, the only way you can really do pizza in Thailand is to license or franchise a partner. What actually happened in that particular scenario is they were so successful that when the franchise agreement expired, the local partner said, we're not really interested in re-upping. And Pizza Hut was disappointed because it said, this has been really successful. Why won't you re-up? Why won't you renew the contract? And the reason was, well, a couple months after that, up popped Thailand's #1 pizza company, a local company that made pizzas that tasted and smelled and seemed an awful lot like the old Pizza Hut pizzas. Yeah, that's right. What Pizza Hut had done was trained up their #1 competitor to simply go on and make their own pizzas and not have to share the profits with the parent company. That's a problem. It's actually a pretty big problem in international franchising. That's why some companies say, we're going to skip exporting, we're going to skip licensing, we're not going to do franchising. Instead, we're going to build a strategic alliance or a joint venture with a local company. Or actually sort of get married with a partner, a local partner. And you should realize that in building and forming a strategic alliance or a joint venture, one of the issues here, of course, is that in some countries, that's the only way to get started in that industry. For instance, in India, the only way for an American company or in any foreign company to get into the retail space in India is to partner with a local Indian company. Walmart just can't go in and start building Walmarts. They have to partner with a domestic Indian company. And of course, the reason why the Indian government does this is to protect Indian companies, domestic companies, from being completely overshadowed by much larger international competitors. Now, what are some of the advantages of forming a strategic alliance or a joint venture with a domestic partner? You see them there. Quick market entry and immediate access to the local partners' materials, technology, vendor partners, distribution, all the things that the local partner has, you now get to leverage on your behalf. And so it's a really great way as long as the joint venture goes well. Now, here's the deal. The disadvantage, you're no longer the master of your own destiny. Shared ownership. You're a partner. And you know immediately some of the difficulties of being in a partnership. For instance, one of the difficulties of being in a partnership is you don't get to decide what movie you're going to watch on Friday night anymore, right? Used to be I might spend an entire Friday night watching nothing but the Matrix and John Wick movies. Now that I'm married, that's not necessarily the decision that we make on a Friday night, if you know what I mean. You're not the only one who's in control of managerial decisions and how you spend the profits. There is ownership in terms of distributed control and decision making. That can be a problem. That can be a real constraint that makes it difficult to embrace a strategic alliance or a joint venture. Therefore, some larger companies decide we're going to skip all three of those modes. We're going to go to the fourth mode, foreign direct investment. What is foreign direct investment? Well, it means, for instance, if you're a petroleum company, rather than forming a joint venture, you're just going to go in there with a couple $1 million. You're going to tear down the entire jungle. You're going to pave your own village so that you can build a refinery, a company store for the employees, even a school for the little kids, and you're going to have your own little village pulling oil out of the ground. Now, what's the advantages? You see them there. Foreign direct investment, if you run the whole show, hey, you have full control. You get to use all of the existing infrastructure. It's all yours. The disadvantages? It takes an enormous amount of capital outlay. It's all on your dime. It's very complex because you're building your own little village. And you have greater uncertainty and greater risk from economic and political sources. What does that look like? Well, what that can look like is if you're really successful, what has happened in several Latin American countries are petroleum plants have been so successful in pulling oil out of the ground that the government says, hey, thanks so much, British Petroleum. Your plant no longer belongs to you. We are taking it over. It is now belonging to our local government. That's right. They're just completely nationalizing the plant and taking it out of your control. If you're British Petroleum, you say, wait a minute, that's not right, that's not fair, that's not legal. And of course, that government says, well, then come sue us because we've got guns. Yeah. This has actually happened. And of course, the risk is much higher because if that happens, you've just invested several $million in building a village and an entire refinery plant. It's much larger money at risk than if you were simply, for instance, sticking products into a brown box and waiting for the United Parcel Service truck to show up. Does this make sense? Okay. So you can see here, and more on this, of course, in the textbook, but when you look at the different modes of entry, there are many, many, many considerations as a company that you need to decide, right? There's many, many nuances to consider, like what's the degree of economic risk? How much will this cost us in the long run? How much control do we have on making specific managerial decisions? What's the acceptable profit level to make this all worth it? What are we risking in the short term? What are we risking in the long term? What's the worst case scenario that can happen? All of these are the kinds of considerations that a company needs to make wisely and deliberately after sufficient research to determine, well, if there's appetite for a product in that the international marketplace, and we've decided it makes sense for us to try to start selling our products or services internationally, then what's the right, most appropriate mode of entry for us to bring our products or services into that marketplace? Should we use exporting? Should we use licensing or franchising? Should we seek to form a strategic alliance or a joint venture with a local partner? Or should we simply skip all of that and invest millions and millions of dollars into foreign direct investment? Well, I hope that helps to describe sort of the differences in these 4 entry modes, some of the nuances that you need to consider. We'll see you in the next lecture.